Hey guys, so how's it going? Okay, basically what we're going to do is we're going to have this very short piece which is on the experience machine. This is written by Nozick, and I should point out that this piece is actually written as part of a book on political philosophy. So remember in the classes that we were looking at when we were looking at skepticism, um, our focus there was on whether we can know that we're related to the external world or we're not related to the external world. So we're there trying to figure out a question about the nature of knowledge. But now imagine this a further issue, okay? So let's say you do plug into the matrix or you plug into life extension. One assumption that you see throughout the movies is that the life inside the virtual world, right? So whether the life inside the matrix or the life inside life extension or the life that Truman has inside the show is in some sense less valuable. So it's not just about whether we can know things or we can't know things. It's about it being less valuable than the real world. And this actually explains to you why the movies proceed as they do. I mean, what they try to do is they try to say that we should exit this machine. And so, Cesar tries to leave, Truman tries to leave, and Neo tries to leave. But implicit in all of this is the idea that if we live inside the matrix, or we live inside life extension, or we live inside the show, then our life is going to be in some sense less valuable. So this is the question that the experience machine focuses on. It doesn't focus on what you can know, assuming that you're in what we call the bad case, but rather it asks, is the bad case more or less valuable than the good case? And, it's not immediately obvious that you shouldn't be inside the Matrix. You can see, for instance, that it's not immediately obvious to all the characters in the movie The Matrix, because the choice between the blue pill and the red pill is exactly meant to be a choice between wanting to stay inside this virtual world versus not wanting to stay in it. And of course, you see also the same thing in Open Your Eyes. In Open Your Eyes, the character hesitates between whether he wants to leave this world or not, and then eventually kind of makes up his mind. Similarly, Truman hesitates, whether he wants to leave this world that he's comfortable with or not. So this is what the experience machine is about. And actually, Nozick's target really is a particular idea. So he uses the experience machine to portray a philosophical idea. And the philosophical idea is this. Sometimes, when I'm talking to people, they'll say something like this. They'll say, look, all that matters is my happiness. So what matters is that my life is a happy life and my experiences are happy experiences. And I think that, in fact, this is really not true. People don't only value happiness, and they don't only value what experiences they have. They value something more than that. So here's the way that Nozick describes it. He says, what matters other than how people's experiences feel from the inside? Suppose there was an experience machine that could give you any experience that you desired. Super duper neuropsychologists could stimulate your brain so that you think and feel that you were writing a great novel or making a friend or reading an interesting book. So the idea is that inside the experience machine, you could have all of the relevant experiences. So if all that matters is like the subjective experience that you have in your life, whether you're happy or sad, whether you're in pain or in pleasure, then in principle, it looks like the experience machine is something great. Because after all, the experience machine is going to be something that will allow you to live a productive and happy, or seemingly productive and happy life. We'll see why seemingly productive. So here's now Nozick asking us. He says, should you plug into this machine for life, pre-programming your life's experiences? If you're worried about missing out on desirable experiences, we can suppose that business enterprises have researched thoroughly the lives of many others. You can pick and choose from their large library of such experiences, selecting your life's experiences, say, for the next 2 years. After 2 years have passed, you will have 10 minutes or 10 hours outside of the experience machine to select the experiences that you would like for the next 2 years. Of course, while in the tank, you wouldn't know that you're there. You'll think that it's actually happening. Now look, there's some details of the experience machine that are specific to Nozick's example. But as you saw, in all of the movies, there's kind of specific things. The Matrix is not exactly life extension, and it's not exactly like being inside the show. And so here there's some specificities to the way that Nozick paints the experience machine, but we can kind of look past those for the moment. And the question is this: why wouldn't you want to plug in? After all, if you just want a good life, where a good life means a happy life, a life where you have all of these pleasant experiences, then that seems exactly like what the machine will give you. If you entered the machine right now, you wouldn't have to live in this post-blown up Beirut with, this a terrible political class suffering all of these things that, you're suffering. You wouldn't have to live in a COVID world. You could live in a world that was constructed, and it's constructed in such a way that it optimizes the cheerfulness and the happiness in your life. So why shouldn't we plug in? That's the question that Nozick asks, right? And so he's asking, is subjective happiness, or is, happiness from my perspective, the only thing that matters? And his response is that he's going to give us 3 objections to stepping into the experience machine. Now, we can talk about whether these objections are good objections or not in the class. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to present these 3 objections. So here's what he says. He says, on the one hand, okay, we want to do certain things. On the other hand, we want to be a certain way. And finally, we want to live in a reality that is not merely man-made. So these are the 3 objections to stepping into the experience machine. Now, Nozick actually assumes that nobody would want to step into the experience machine, but this is a controversial assumption. We don't have to make that assumption. But he wants to try to prove to you that you shouldn't do that even if you got that opportunity. And this is because you want to do certain things, be a certain way, and you want to be in touch with reality. And he thinks that none of these things you can attain in the experience machine. So let's see why not. Well, imagine doing certain things. Now, certainly when I enter into the experience machine, I can have experiences of having done various things. So imagine that it's one of my dreams is to go to the moon, or maybe to climb Mount Everest. Your experience, you might not want to do things that are that fancy. You might just want to do simpler things, like you want to fall in love, or you want to get a PhD. All of these things are things that you might want to do. Well, in the experience machine, you can have the experience of doing those things. But notice that you wouldn't have really done them. After all, in the experience machine, to have the experience of doing a PhD is not the same as doing a PhD. Doing a PhD might require that you sit down and do all of this boring work, but having the experience of having done it, right, might not involve all of that boring work. So it might be, think about like in movies when they cut to the character going through a lot of life experiences, but there's only like the nice, pleasant parts, or, like the whole 4 years pass in a very short time, just through a few scenes. Well, the experience machine is something like that. In fact, the experience machine might be able to give you this experience just by giving you the relevant sorts of memories that you need. So you wouldn't have really gotten a PhD if you just have the experience of getting a PhD. Think about, some of the movies that we watched, Imagine that Neo is really interested in walking down a particular street in New York. Now, inside the Matrix, he has the experience of being in New York, and he has the experience of walking down a certain street in New York. But has he really walked down the street in New York? Obviously not. He's not in New York. He's in, that machine that he's sitting in. He's actually not walking at all. He just thinks that he's walking. Compare it to a dream, In a dream, maybe you dreamed that you fell in love with somebody. Well, you had the experience of falling in love with somebody in the dream. But did you, in fact, fall in love with somebody? No, because in fact, there was nobody there for you to love. What there was is an image of a person, and you had these experiences of having fallen in love with them, but in fact, none of this really happened. So the idea is that if you want to do certain things in life, you're not going to be able to get that out of the experience machine. The experience machine is only going to give you the experience of having had that, not the actual doing of that stuff. So imagine that you did want to fall in love in the experience machine, so you can program the machine so that, you meet the boy or the girl of your dreams, and now, you have what is seemingly like an amazing, meeting, and then you guys have this beautiful relationship together. You eventually get married, you have some kids, and you live happily, for the rest of your lives. Still, that person doesn't exist. After all, it's just something that's designed. It's an experience of a person, not a real person. It's the same as being in a dream. Think about Cesar wanting to fall in love with Sophia, but of course, Sophia is not in life extension. So even if he has experiences of having fallen in love with Sophia and having, had a nice time with her, those wouldn't be real experiences of connecting to Sophia. Now, you can compare this to a different situation. Look, imagine that you did want to have an experience of falling in love with somebody, and now let's pretend that you're not in a machine, you're in the real world. So you meet a person, and this girl, seems kind of really wonderful, she's very nice to you, seems very sincere, she's very loving, here you are, you're having this experience, and now you meet this person, you get married to them, and you live your lives together. So, whether it's your husband or your wife, right? You marry this person, you guys have kids, you live your whole life, and then you die. And you've died, you seemingly had this perfect love relationship, your partner was always wonderful, he or she was always interested in you. They gave you, all of these like nice gifts, and you had like these wonderful kids, and so on and so forth. Well, okay, but now we can stipulate the following situation. So imagine that, in fact, this girl or boy that you fell in love with were actually very, very intelligent people, so that's really nice that they're intelligent, but the problem is that they're also not very good people. So, in fact, your partner, throughout your whole relationship, as he or she was falling in love with you, they actually cheated on you during this time. Later on, when you guys got engaged and then got married, they were also cheating on you during this time. They weren't only cheating on you, but they also really didn't like you very much. They thought that it would be helpful for them to stay with you. You can imagine there could be all sorts of reasons for that, But they wanted to stay. They stayed with you, but they didn't really, think all that much of you, because they're very smart. Maybe they looked down upon your level of intelligence, or maybe they thought that you sometimes behaved in ways that they didn't really quite enjoy. And so they talked badly about you. They didn't just start, they actually did. They talked to their friends. They said, oh, my partner is such an idiot, and so on. But they always ensured that you never heard about any of it. And in fact, later on, they met a person who they fell in love with, and they married that person too. And then they kept these two separate families. You were one of the families. They had this other family on the side. But here's the thing. You never knew about any of this. So subjectively, from your point of view, your experiences were always these ideal experiences of having been with a lover and so on. Well, now you died, and so the whole time that you were with this person, you thought that everything was great. Now the question is, would you want this sort of relationship? If all you care about are experiences of being loved, experiences of having a nice family, of having a wonderful partner, and so on, then yeah, that should be enough. After all, you never knew about any of the horrible things that were happening behind your back, and your experience was always pleasant. You always thought that things were going well for you. So what's wrong with this sort of experience? Now, Nozick thinks that intuitively nobody would want this experience. In fact, we think that although we did not subjectively suffer, our life was not a good life. It wasn't a happy life. The only issue is that we didn't know that it was that sort of life. So although I didn't experience, being cheated on, I was in fact cheated on. I didn't experience being lied to. I did in fact get lied to. Although I never experienced not being loved, in fact, I wasn't loved. So in this case, you might think actually your experience is worse than it would have been otherwise. At least, if you had found out that your partner was cheating on you, then you would have had a chance to save yourself. But in this case, you'd never even had that chance. So it seems like this is the worst sort of scenario where you're in the bad case, but you don't know that you're in the bad case. So this is one case, for not stepping into the experience machine or not caring only about our subjective experiences. We really care about doing things and not just feeling like we did certain things or not just experiencing ourselves as having done certain things. Okay, but it's not just about doing things, it's also about being a certain way. Imagine that you wanted to be an honest person, okay? So this is a project that you can take on in your life, and it's a difficult project because one is tempted to lie at various points in their life. Let's say you wanted to be courageous, well, that's also a difficult task. Let's say you wanted to be, a truly moral person, to have treated other people in a good way all the time. Well, these are all kind of admirable tasks. Now, in the experience machine, you could have the experience of not lying to anyone, the experience, of being courageous, of saving lots of people from disasters. And you could experience yourself as, what was the last one that we said, of being a moral person. But in fact, none of these would have happened. Well, here's one reason why not. Because in the experience machine, there was nobody else. There was just you having these experiences. So you weren't courageous because you didn't save anyone. There was nobody there to save. There was some digital, information. Think about now, the Truman Show. Truman saves somebody in the show, but it's all set up. That guy is an actor who's pretending to drown, and now Truman saves him, and so that looks like, something that he did, and that he is a courageous person as a result. But in fact, he's not courageous. He didn't really save anyone. That was all just a setup. So, if you wanted to not lie to anybody, imagine that Cesar takes on this project inside Life Extension. So he never lies to the psychologist that's his friend. But in fact, there is no psychologist that's his friend. So he never was honest with anybody, and he never didn't really lie to anybody. So being a certain way is also something that you lose from being inside the experience machine. And then finally, think about this last problem, the issue of being connected to a genuine reality. So one problem with Life Extension and the Matrix and the Truman Show and the Experience Machine is that they're not designed by nature. It's not if we're in the good case right now, if Earth is really either created by God or created through a natural process like natural selection or whatever randomness in the universe, then you would be experiencing a genuine reality. But if this is something that was created by some robots or by a smart director or by the Life Extension people, then the world that you're interacting with is not the real world. It's a man-made world, and so it's limited to its designers. Our world, if we're in the good case, so we're assuming we're in the good case, if we're in that world, then we have all of the possibilities that reality affords, whether those are possibilities that God has created or whether those are possibilities that emerge out of the Big Bang or whatever. By contrast, inside the Matrix, we would only be getting whatever the computers were able to design. So we wouldn't really be afforded the full possibility of reality, the full possibilities of reality. We would only be living in a limited reality. Of course, this limited reality might be bigger than anything that we can imagine, It's not like every one of us is going to be a scientist studying the fundamental structure of reality. So maybe this doesn't matter all that much, but Nozick thinks that it does matter to us, that we're not just stuck in a world out of that's created by some limited beings or that is limited compared to the real reality. So think again of you being inside your dream. Inside your dream, you would be in a situation where you're inventing that reality. So if you were to live in your dreams, all your dreams would contain, the only things that your dreams would contain would be stuff that you could think up. There wouldn't be anything you couldn't think up in that dream world. So that's the problem that he envisions. Now, are these really problems, or are these artifacts of the way that Nozick envisions the experience machine? Because now I just want to point out to you some things, you know? So for instance, Nozick imagines that the experience machine is a one-player game, so to speak, you know? You're there by yourself in it. But notice, for instance, that in the Matrix, that's not the case. Because all the people are in the Matrix, when you meet a person and you tell the truth to them, you really are meeting another person and telling the truth to them. What is wrong is that that person and you are both outside the Matrix in those VAP machines, right? So you are, in fact, interacting with other people. It's not the case that you only seem to have experiences of doing so. Depends on how detailed the machine is. So this is what I want us to talk about in class. What can we say about those machines? Could we fix the experience machine? Could we fix the Matrix? Could we fix life extension? And could we fix the Truman Show such that we receive all of the same experiences that we would receive in our reality from those realities? Okay, well, that about covers it, and I'll see you guys in class.